So, cupping. I'm sure you've seen athletes like Michael Phelps in the Olympics who have got these great big marks on their skin from where they've had cupping. But does this intervention actually help us? Does it actually work? Let's dive in. Hey guys, Khalid here. Welcome back to Clinical Physio. So cupping is an intervention that has caused huge controversy in the physiotherapy world. But let's dive into what it actually is and perhaps some research to try and evaluate, does it actually work in practice? So first of all, what is cupping? So the dry cupping method typically utilizes cups made of plastic, glass, or silicone. These cups are placed on the skin, often targeting areas of pain or specific acupuncture points. To create a therapeutic effect, a suction pump is used, generating negative pressure around the targeted region. This action causes a vacuum effect in the subcutaneous tissues beneath the cup. The vacuum effect from the negative pressure supposedly leads to a localized expansion of the tissues. This expansion is thought to result in increased blood flow, reduced muscle tension, and a general relief in the targeted area, contributing to its popularity for pain management. Additionally, the method is often chosen for its simplicity and relative ease of application, making it a favored choice in both traditional and modern therapeutic settings. So following that, why don't we check out some research to see if it actually works in practice? But a really important note for me to start off with is that unfortunately the evidence isn't of the highest quality. And that's because a lot of the systematic reviews don't have a lot of quality trials to go off when forming their conclusions. But nevertheless, let's see what we can find. So the first piece of research is a systematic review from Kramer et al. In 2020. This huge review included 1,172 patients looking at the use of cupping in lots of different treatment conditions. First, they looked at 7 randomized controlled trials using cupping with neck pain. They looked at 3 randomized controlled trials for patients with osteoarthritis of the knee, 3 randomized controlled trials for patients with low back pain or carpal tunnel syndrome, and 1 randomized controlled trial for patients with fibromyalgia or myofascial pain. So the conclusions from this research group was that cupping could be a useful treatment option for patients suffering with chronic pain. However, they suggested in lots of detail that they were concerned about the quality of the studies they were having to evaluate, and that perhaps these studies weren't good enough for them to firmly put their conclusions into practice. In fact, they called for more studies that compared cupping to a sham or placebo form of cupping in the future to get better quality results. And thankfully for us, Silva et al. Came to the front and actually put this research in place. So, Silva et al. 2021. This research group looked at the use of cupping for chronic, non-specific low back pain, perhaps off the fact that Kramer et al. Had suggested that chronic pain might be a condition that cupping would be useful for. So Silva et al. Looked at 90 individuals in their randomized control trial, all with chronic low back pain, and they split them into 2 groups. Half of the participants had genuine dry cupping therapy between the levels of L1 and L5, and the second group had sham or placebo cupping therapy. Both groups had their relative interventions once a week for 8 weeks. So the research group assessed patients both before the initial treatment session, after the initial treatment session, at the 4-week mark, and at the 8-week mark when the treatment concluded. The primary measure they looked at was pain intensity, looking at this at the numerical pain rating scale when the patients were at rest, during fast walking, and during bending the lumbar spine. They also looked at things like physical function, general mobility, and perceived quality of life and psychological symptoms too. What did they find? Well, the key identifying point was that dry cupping therapy, genuine cupping therapy, was not superior to sham cupping therapy, both in terms of pain, but also range of movement, quality of life, and psychological effect as well. So whilst there was no difference in the results if you had genuine cupping or placebo cupping, did patients improve at all? Well, yes, there were some improvements. The research group did highlight that it wasn't enough to make a clinically significant difference, but there was some improvements in both groups. But because the placebo group had benefits as well, this perhaps shows, is it the actual vascular, local tissue, blood flow thought process that is leading to that improvement? Or is it just touch and a genuine massage that sham cupping or placebo cupping might have? Food for thought. So I do have one more study to share with you. It's a little bit of a lower quality one, but worth considering. This is from Williams et al. In 2019, and they looked at the effects of cupping amongst 25 asymptomatic, with no pain, college athletes to look to see whether or not cupping had a positive effect on their hamstring flexibility. So these 25 soccer players were split into two groups. Both groups had their hamstring flexibility tested with a passive straight leg raise before and after treatment. The first group received 7 minutes of therapeutic cupping therapy. The second group had no treatment at all. And so we were genuinely looking at the difference in hamstring flexibility for cupping versus no treatment. The results? No difference in flexibility between the two groups. Even though one group had no intervention at all, it looks like cupping doesn't help with hamstring flexibility for these individuals. So, as well as the fact that there doesn't seem to be a hugely robust set of evidence that helps demonstrate that cupping is a better treatment tool than placebo cupping or no treatment at all, here in the United Kingdom, the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy has actually removed the use of cupping from their insurance policies for when they insure physiotherapists in their treatment. In fact, as you can see from this text, they identify that other treatments such as reflexology, aromatherapy, Reiki, and energy medicine, in addition to cupping, are no longer covered by the insurance policy. So does it actually work? Well, I suppose the evidence doesn't provide a really robust argument. I think one thing that we can learn from this is similar to what we found with other interventions such as sports massage. It might be the fact that it is quite simply the therapeutic effect of having someone or something working and moving on your skin, something we call neuromodulation. And perhaps the evidence from Silva et al., where if you have placebo cupping, it has the same effect as genuine cupping, shows us that it's not the local tissue, vascular blood flow, local healing changes that are actually helping here. Maybe it's just touch. So the reason this is important for me is that it just goes to show that when we're educating patients, we shouldn't be telling them that the effects of cupping are in this local tissue blood flow stuff. And in fact, it might just be that we need to explain to them that genuine therapeutic touch could be what helps them here. At least that means that they don't believe that they have to keep coming back to see the practitioner time and time again for that local tissue healing component. And that is probably one of my main conclusions from this research. So guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please support us by smashing that like button. Remember, we've got loads more resources on our Instagram account @ClinicalPhysio and our website, clinicalphysio.com. My name's Khalid. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon here on Clinical Physio.